Hello again, and thank you so much for coming back because I see a lot of names that I know. So hi. For those of you guys who don't know me, I'm Maddie. I forgot to change my name on this. I'm Kirsten's daughter. She was supposed to be here tonight, but just got like 2 hours ago the option to go get her COVID vaccine. And she took it, as she should. So I'm here now filling in. So I apologize for the awkwardness or the not knowing what I'm saying. So without further ado here, I just want to introduce Rob, who is with us as our moderator tonight. He was formerly the manager of the Clinton Bookshop, and he is a board member of NABA, the New Atlantic Independent Booksellers Association. And as my mom would like to call him, he is like the savior of the bookstore, and we probably would not be here without his good words in our ear, letting us know what to do and helping sell books every time he walks through the door, as many of our attendees and customers know already. Throughout the meeting today, I will be behind the chat. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. We're going to come back around 7:45 to start, right between panelists and attendees, questions and answers. And without any other words from me, I'm going to turn it right over to Rob. Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm really excited to watch this. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you. And I'm in this position where I have to introduce Chuck Wendig. And the difficulty, and I just want to tell everybody, if you really want to know Chuck Wendig, go to terribleminds.com. There is not enough that I could say about the body of work that you have done, the diversity of the work from comics and nonfiction to Star Wars and you name it. And your latest book, your latest novel, The Wanderers, it's on my pile. I'm leaving for Key West tomorrow. It might go with me.
Oh, Key West right now. You're so lucky. Can I go with you?
Exactly. So, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really, really excited about this book. And there's two reasons I want to tell you, Chuck. My husband and I, we had a bookshop in Clinton, New Jersey. The bookshop was there for 15 years. Prior to that, I was a therapist. My post-bookshop life is back to being a therapist. And I
feel like there's a good jump there, by the way. It's like books are therapy in their own way too. So I think that works.
Yeah, but the people I work with now are not nearly as sick as the people I worked with when I was selling books. So, when Kirsten told me about this book and asked me to do this event, I kind of jumped on it. She sent me the e-galley, and I jumped on it a little bit more. If there's anybody out there listening or who's asking questions, if cursing offends you, mute your computer, because the first thing I want to do, Chuck, I want to share with them an illustration.
Sure.
That what I do with this book, I'll give you real quick, is when my clients are sitting with me and we're talking some heavy duty shit, I'll say, give me a number between 10 and 200. And I think it's 217 pages in the book.
Sure.
And they'll give me a number. And today, one of them picked this number. Okay, it didn't show the whole picture. But if y'all can see the illustration of this, I'm going to read it out. I'm going to read it out loud for you. Extend both middle fingers, grit your teeth, squeeze your glutes. Now you have 3 arms, 4, 10, 100. Fuck fingers cast to the heaven, to your haters, to your foes. The middle fingers have fingers. You are blooming like a fucking flower. The client that chose that today, we ended our session with her absolutely joy-filled because she said, this was what she feels sometimes. This is what she feels. What was it like for you putting together all of these incredible anti-affirmations?
I'm sure everyone here is aware that the last 4 years have been a little screwy, as it were, and not always our favorite time of our lives. And so, just existing in the America that we had in the last 4 years has been really tough. And even being on social media, understandably, it was a very sort of angry, vitriolic place. And I don't say that undeservedly. I mean, you know, people were mad about a lot of things, justifiably so. That being said, you know, you can't swim in that all the time, and you can't sort of, otherwise you're sort of drinking the poison. And I really wanted to, you know, there are these wonderful people like Maggie Smith or Lin-Manuel Miranda doing these, you know, morning motivations and affirmations, and I love those. I genuinely love those. And so I wanted to contribute kind of my own thing, but I couldn't do it in a way that wasn't me. Like they would get about 50% of the way through one of those affirmations, and like it was like a train, just you could watch it kind of wobbling off the track, and it's going to land into an orphanage, and then there's going to be a volcano. It's just like I just would always kind of keep twisting it until it felt more like something I would write. So they were earnest. I meant them. Like I was trying to make myself happy and trying to hopefully make other people happy in the same way. And if they got actually some affirmation or motivation out of it too, that was a value add. So they always seem to become monstrous and strange. So I did them for about a year, I think. And then eventually a publisher, Jessica Fuller, editor at Rizzoli, came to me and was like, do you want to put these in a book? And I was like, are you high? Of course I want to put this in a book. I don't even know what that would look like, but I really want them in a book. And so that's how that started. And that's why there's a book now that exists.
So you didn't even have to pitch it. They came and pitched to you.
Yeah, they came and pitched to me because some of those tweets went viral. In fact, the magic skeleton tweet, which is in the book, I mean, it still goes around. It goes around on like Facebook, and it goes around, excuse me, phone. It goes around Facebook, it goes around on Instagram, it goes around, I get it emailed to me, I see it randomly on Twitter pop up. It's one of those ones that sort of lives like a ghost in the internet. So yeah.
And to complement the and I will call them affirmations, because you know, just using that one that I just pulled up, how many of us, you know, don't want to just say that, you know, we just don't want to, and just to let it out and let it go. You know, there was a book written a couple of years ago, and I always used to say that, you know, I always wanted to write a book called Get the Fuck Over It. And then that book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, comes out. And I'm old enough to remember, and I don't know if you're old enough to remember, back in the early days, you know, the 80s, creative visualization was the thing, and all these book of affirmations came out, and they were like, just breathe and imagine the beach. And I'm like, no, I can't imagine the beach right now because I just got into a car accident. My car is totaled.
Right.
And then to, you know, to be able to, you know, so I always wanted to write but I'm just not as creative enough to write a book of affirmations for people to get the fuck over it.
Yeah, I mean, like an anti-affirmation in some ways is still an affirmation.
Absolutely, it absolutely is. You know, because it's validating you. It's validating the person.
Yeah, and giving voice to those sort of weird, frustrated, you know, madcap opinions you have running through your head at any given moment in time.
Absolutely. How did you connect with Natalie Metzger? Because I think the illustrations are so absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I had known of her work for a while. She had done some work with John Scalzi, and she was, you know, sort of an internet mainstay in terms of her cartooning, and she was a friend of a friend, and I got to meet her on a tour, I think, for Wanderers. And I'd always said, like, if I can ever find a reason to work with you, I absolutely will. I don't know what that would look like. And I really never knew. I had no idea in my mind of how we would work together. And so when Jessica came to me and it was like, can we put these in a book? And she's like, we want to do art, you know, and I'm like, well, are you taking suggestions for the artist? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, then I pretty much had one name. Right. I mean, obviously, you know, I knew Natalie, if she wasn't able to do it, we would figure that out. But like, I had one person I really wanted to do that art. And even talking to Natalie this week, and we did a podcast together, and it was like, she described her process of art making similar to the way that I worked these anti-affirmations, these monstrous motivations, which is like, she kind of starts to draw. I can't draw a normal thing. If I'm drawing, you know, if I'm supposed to draw like a muscular person, she's like, next thing I know, I've drawn a beetle body with those muscular arms, and suddenly it's a beetle with two human, you know, bicep muscles. And I was just like, yeah, that's, I mean, because she just keeps sort of ratcheting the weirdness up and isn't afraid of bones and guts and weird monsters and squids and sharks and all the and possums. There's a lot of possums.
Yeah. Again, I think it just complemented the words. You know what I mean? You're looking at the illustration, you're looking at the words, and you go back and forth. And you know what I want to be able to do with clients of mine, my encouraging them to buy the book, and to to just use it as a tool, because when you're going through a tough day, you want to be able, and you talked about the last 4 years, and even into this year, I mean, a lot of us, felt a really heavy sigh of relief
Yes.
come January 20th, but the events of the last couple of weeks, have been, grueling,
Yeah.
So we had a presidency that was not, well, the presidency.
The presidency. Yeah. Say no more.
We had the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
what a 1-2 punch.
It is, and it is a whole lot. So, getting this message across to people is important. I want to go back to, the diversity. The body of your work is profoundly diverse. Again, everything from comics to nonfiction to Star Wars novel. And I'm trying to remember the first time I met you. It was one of the series you were doing a release on. It was the Miriam Black, one of the Miriam.
Oh,
Black.
one of the Miriam. Sure, yeah.
And I mean, we had your books on our shelf at the shop, and I was like, oh, you know what I think, and I'd love to say, as a bookseller, oh, I've read every single book in the world, but
yeah.
No,
Yeah, as a writer, I wish I could too, but it doesn't work.
Exactly. But you become very accustomed to one writer's style. And, like if they're mystery, if they're nonfiction, they kind of have this cadence to their writing. And I think that that's what attracts readers to writers.
Yeah.
So do you find that your readers, when you were putting together this collection, were your readers who read the Miriam Black, do they come into your process at all? Do you think of those readers, or was this totally just, this is me?
With Magic Skeleton, I mean, they factored into me tweeting them in the first place, just because, I mean, the Miriam Black books are pretty off kilter. I mean, in terms of their, they're thriller / crime / horror, but even they're a sort of a genre Frankenstein.
Okay.
And so I always like to, in the plots of my books and the stories and the characters, I always like to, you think you're going one way, and then how can we, not in a Shyamalan-y hacky twist sort of way, but how can we keep ratcheting those screws and changing the narrative? Because if I can surprise myself, I can surprise you. That's a win for everybody. At the end of the day, it makes you maybe feel a little more about the book and think a little more about the book if you're never quite on stable ground. And so writing these, were very much about how do we put those things in words that aren't stable ground. Like, how are these are not your average affirmations. It's like, you can do it. Or like you say, just a casual visualization. Imagine yourself at the beach. It's kind of like, imagine yourself at the beach, but then there's a monster washing up onto it. So, and my voice is one of those things where I hope, even in this book, that persists, and that so you always feel like, no matter what the genre, no matter what the format, no matter what the age range, that you feel like you're reading a book of mine. I mean, genre being a sort of essentially a marketing category. You had a bookstore, so that genre is useful for the categorization of the bookstore, for the categorization for the readers, but also it's like there's some hazy territory there. And I think the best thing an author can do for themselves is to sort of imagine that they are their own individual genre, and that you really want to write books that sound like you, that speak to you, that speak to the people who want to read your books.
Okay. I have a lot of friends that are writers, and a lot of people who create art, whether they're creating music, whether they're creating books, whether they're creating paintings. They talk about the process of putting their work out. That and I've heard some people say, well, I really felt bad putting this out because I felt so connected to this. This book, Skeletons, is kind of like was put together specifically for the purpose of putting it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever experience that unique sense of ownership to any of your work, that you actually were like, okay, I don't want to put this out yet?
Because I don't want people to read it yet, or because it's
Yeah, I mean, I've tried, or is there some things that are, that you might feel a sense of ownership and you're not ready to put it out?
Oh, I mean, in some ways, all of them. I mean, I always have that sense of, who is it's for me. The first time, your first draft is always for you, right? I mean, for the writer, whether you mean it to be or not, that first draft is like it's yours and yours alone. And then by that second draft and the subsequent drafts are kind of for everybody else. I mean, I do make peace with that, but there's always that sense of like, well, I know it's going to be out into the wild and I don't control this or own this anymore. And that's a scary kind of vertiginous feeling. But also it's nice, and it's the point of kind of doing what we do to some degree. So I've made peace with it, but there's always that tweak of like, ooh, no. What if I just kept it here? What if I just kept it in my house for a while and no one had to see it?
And the thing is, it's like, what I like about artists in general is, watching their face when they put their work out there and watching the reaction to the people. Authors and people who create books, it could be I mean, the criticism could be horrifying to people. And even as a bookseller, people, I don't think I ever wrote a book. I did write a book review for the NABA, the monthly
Sure.
books, and I would write those, but if ever I didn't like a book, I would never say that.
Yeah.
Because it was like, again, because it was like that person spent time creating this.
Yes.
But the criticism for books is so amazing. It's so much more over the top than it is for other. I mean, even if somebody doesn't like a song, you don't see them write like 4 paragraphs and go, God, this fucking song sucked.
No, some people will write a book in response to the book.
Exactly. They do. What is, I mean, again, going back to, the diversity of the body of your work, I'm sure that there have been times where you have, read something and went, wait, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, often, frequently with every book that happens. And there's kind of 2 things going on. Number one, the sort of the garden variety criticism, whether it's extreme or in favor or extreme in opposition to the book. I've sort of come to terms with as many books as I've had out. I've been able to come to terms with the fact that I control what I can control, which is the book that I wrote. And after that, it's, it goes to an editor and a publisher, and there's a book cover put on it, and it goes to bookstores, and that's now out of my hands, and I really can't be too invested in how people see it. The one trick is sometimes you do get reviewers who want to challenge you about it, and they want to tell you as if you can fix it, as if I can go back and edit that book and then put it back on the shelf for them, which is not how that works unless I can unkill the tree that the book was printed on. That's just a thing you get used to. But with Star Wars, it was a little different because Star Wars had a measure of criticism that was cultural to it, that was about having a gay character, that was about, what they perceived to be an SJW, social justice warrior, version of Star Wars. And those I felt more comfortable addressing because they really, at the end of the day, weren't about me. I mean, some of them made them very personal and said some very not nice things about me, but they were about a cultural idea that I felt was something I could talk about and address, because it really wasn't about the book. It was about this, not only a purity of fandom, but then a purity of supremacy to some regard, and in many cases, a kind of weird bigotry that I felt was worth talking about in those reviews.
So yeah, and I was going to ask about that. That you put your experience into each book. And I can't remember the writer who said it, but he said, most fiction is more true than nonfiction.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, there's a real, because it's more emotionally true. That's where it gets, there's like a deeper, weirder truth. It's like the truth behind the walls of your house. Like there's the real house is behind the walls. Like there's all kinds of skeletons in that house, and that's where the truth is.
That's what kind of makes it fun too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And for readers finding that, and for readers finding their own truth, because that's the other thing about fiction, as much as it's the truth of the author, there's a mirror aspect too, that people are seeing what they either want to see or can see through their own experiences through the book.
How old were you when your first book was published? When your first book was done?
Well, it would have been almost 10 years ago. So it would have been in like 33, 34.
Okay. If there was something that you have learned over the past 10 years, that you would be able to tell that person 10 years ago, what would it be?
Oh,
I mean, you wrote a book of fuck it affirmations. I mean,
yeah.
you have something to tell that person.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because on the one hand, like I kind of have no real regrets. Like I wouldn't be here if I hadn't done all the things, good or bad, that I had done prior to now. I'm the sum total of those moments and choices. But I would definitely go back and give myself some sort of like more in the weeds, inside baseball career advice. Like, don't give up rights to this book, or don't sign with this publisher, sign with this publisher instead. Like I had a few times where I went one direction and I maybe could have gone another direction. And it wasn't nothing that was career killing or damaging in a meaningful way, but like sort of a preferential thing. I'm like, I could have made a different choice there and maybe spared myself either some heartache or maybe actually made a little more money in some cases.
Yeah, I think it's funny because everybody has this amazing perception that authors are all worth multi-million, they all have multi-million-dollar homes, and
Yeah.
I know a lot of authors that still have day jobs.
Yeah, I'm super privileged and fortunate that I do not. And even in not having a day job, I'm not a millionaire by any stretch of the imagination, even though occasionally some people on Twitter want to assure me that I am rolling in money like it's indecent exposure or something.
And going back to that last question, if there is, what would you tell your younger self? What do you think your younger self would tell you 10 years later? Flip that question around.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd like to think my younger self would be like, good job. Like, it'd be like happy that 10 years later that it was still kind of working out. Because 10 years ago, I had no idea if this would really work. I took a big shift going from freelance game writing to novel writing. I had to basically quit freelancing because I couldn't kind of do both at the same time. Freelance writing to sort of survive in it, I had to do so much of it that there was no time to write a book. So to be able to actually sit and concentrate on a novel, I had to really take that time off, which kind of, it was like jumping out of a plane and building the parachute on the way down. I really sort of had to figure out how to do that. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would like to hope some part of my 10-year-old self, or not 10-year-old, but 10 years past self would still have some idealism and could impart some, instead of being, beaten down or anything.
Is the idealism that you had 10 years ago, because it's interesting that you would use the word idealism, because I find a lot of idealism in the book.
Good.
I find a lot of idealism in the book.
Yeah.
Some of that real basic, that before our mind becomes infected with, say the last 4 years.
Yeah.
That is there, and that's my goal, when I work with individuals, whether I'm working with them, because of mental health issues or because of, drug and alcohol issues. My goal is to, not to get them to a point where they were before, but to get them to a point where they're moving forward.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're, evolving as a person, as opposed to, trying to capture something that once was.
Mm-hmm.
so this book, although you mentioned the last couple of years, a lot of it was a lot of it a collection of also who you have become up until now. Just
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's the idealism I have now is a more active and willful idealism, meaning I have to try.
Okay.
And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think maybe it's good to not just be automatically one way or the other, but to actually, because if you're willfully idealistic and if you choose to be optimistic, and you can see that optimism is itself a form of resistance and rebellion, just sort of being hopeful is almost anathema to these times. It doesn't feel like a natural fit. Maybe that's why it's all the more important to kind of force it a little bit. And this book is definitely that, the light won't be there naturally. I'm going to have to light this weird torch and throw it into the dark and see what happens.
Okay. So it's because I think that a lot of people, artists in general put a lot of themselves into their work. So what do you think is the most? And my cat's going to probably walk right past.
That's all right. It's classic cat move.
This book, because it's a collection of just a whole bunch of really cool things. I'm sure you didn't have to do a whole lot of research, because you had the tweets.
Yeah, I just had to tweet nonsense into the world, and somehow that worked out for me. Yeah.
Before we got into the position that we're in as a country, did the concept of this book ever cross your mind? Did something like this ever cross your mind? Is this something that was stewing, or it was just a whole fucked up last 4 years?
I think it was just the fucked up last 4 years. I mean, my Twitter's always been sort of odd, even prior to the 4 years. It's always been
I agree with that.
Yeah, like an exhortation of weirdness and absurdity. Like my humor is grounded in that sort of weird space. I've always felt that way and enjoyed that kind of humor a lot. I mean, even a book like, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I felt fundamental to me, is while it's occasionally sharp and snarky and incisive, it's also occasionally just bizarre, just goofy, strange humor that must have felt right at the time to write it, and turned out that it was. The whole thing of the whale falling in the first book, and the whale is born into existence, and then the entire internal monologue of the whale as it falls to the ground and dies is profound and sad and absurd and wonderful. And so I've always sort of been in that space. So my Twitter's been there, but I felt like this one didn't come, I don't want to say it didn't come naturally, because I didn't feel that these were hard to write, but it was like one of those things where I had to, I would not have carried this on for a year, which is what I did. I literally Monday through Friday, every day, I would get up and do something, one of these tweets. I mean, there are a lot that are not in this book. And it just felt like I'm going to get up and I'm going to march into the Twitter cave and just say some, I wouldn't think too hard about it. I would just sort of let my freak flag fly a little bit and just put some weird little affirmation into the world and see what happened. And people seemed to like them, and I'm glad they did. And that was the goal for me.
I guess I want to know, what time did you wake up and start thinking about this shit? Because man, my mind doesn't go like.
Generally it was like right after coffee. So like,
Okay.
6:30, I'm drinking coffee, 7 a.m. I'm done coffee, and it's time to write that tweet maybe.
Okay.
Sometimes I get it up by like before 9 a.m. and then retweet it a couple hours later just for later time.
So there's possibly a second book in this coming.
I guess if this one, by the grace of whatever publishing god exists, if this one actually reaches an audience, and if you want another one, I'll take it.
The audience that this has got to reach is social workers and therapists.
That's the
market, because and I'm going to be really honest with you. If in all of my years working with people, I always felt that the term self-help was kind of an oxymoron.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it's like you're reading a book; it's not self-help, and I've only ever given a couple of books to read, and one of them was The Tao of Pooh by Benjamin Hoff.
Oh, sure.
And the other one was When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron. Because I think that those are not self-help books.
Yeah.
but we're always looking for books that we can give to clients and say, look, don't do that.
Yeah.
Take a look at this. And this is one that I absolutely will have no problem, handing to a client and saying, look, you know what, think about, because you do have to think about them. It's not just, oh, this is really funny. It's like, oh, that's really funny. Oh, yeah. In fact, when I read the one today, when I read the fuckity fuck one today, the, blooming, flower, um, this was a woman, she waited about 5 seconds and then just laughed hysterically. And she said it captured her.
Yeah. That's
It
perfect.
captured her.
Well, that's an honor and really great, honestly.
It is,
Thrilled by that.
and I kind of felt a degree of pride too, because it was like, yes, I get you, and because I usually say to people, look, your job is to get me to where you are, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to do this together.
Yeah.
And so when I was able to say, yeah, you know what, I get, was able, yeah, I got you. So I think that, if Rizzoli needs any help marketing it, tell him, you know what, hit the social workers.
Hit the social workers. All right.
Hit the social workers. Hit those people that are out there looking for a way to, let people know that it's okay to be cynical sometimes. It's okay to be angry sometimes. It's okay to be, want to isolate sometimes. And that's, this. I hate to use the term, you need to give yourself permission, because I feel like I have to tilt my head and lean in.
Yeah, but no, that's in there. I mean, there's an aspect to this that's like there are some of these are about imagining revenge and sort of envisioning sort of these like hiding away from the world, or they're not just like you're good enough and strong enough and got strong people like you. It's it's
absolutely. And it's fun when I say, pick a page. And they'll pick a page, and there's one in there, and I wish I could remember what it was. I think the illustration was a little ghost.
Oh, is it the blood? There's a blood ghost one.
No, it's not the blood ghost one. This was just like a little ghost, and it was breathe in, breathe out. It started with breathe in, breathe out.
Oh, is it a little Pac? Does it reference Pac-Man? Do I remember that?
Yes.
One?
Yes. Oh yeah, it's Pac-Man.
Yeah.
And then when somebody chose that one, I don't remember what page it was on. But they kind of looked at me, and there was something in there that said something about thus eating them and stealing their power. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of people struggle with keeping their power.
Sure.
And that's the discussion that we had about it after we read that. Had everything to do with that part of wellness is holding on to your power.
There you go.
And not
I like that. I mean, the weird thing about the book is that some of this stuff is a little bit dark. Like it's like not dark as in like grim, but I mean it's definitely there's some twisted, maybe some stuff in there, and I don't.
Yeah, I agree.
I never felt like that's not necessarily a positive thing. I think sometimes people become a little too precious. There was a term recently that I found profound, which is toxic optimism.
Yes.
That idea that you just like you'll always get through it. Oh, you have cancer, don't worry, you just have positive thinking. Like it'll be fine. Like I think it's good to not have that, and it's good to. That's not to say you have to give into pessimism, but toxic optimism. This book I feel like is ideally maybe an antidote to toxic optimism. Like every time it starts off with one of those like you're going to be great, it kind of starts to melt slag and something else.
Hey, thank you for the visualization of Richard Simmons. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I agree. It's kind of like, when somebody, when people are grieving, whether they're grieving a death or whether they're grieving the loss of their home or something, they'll go, it'll get better. No, it never gets better. It just gets different.
Yeah, it just gets different. Right.
And we change our perspective. And that's what I found so fascinating about this book is that it changes the perspective. And I think that you're right. Toxic optimism, we live in a culture where we want that people want that toxic optimism. and then when reality slaps them in the face, and I think we were in that. I think,
Yeah.
the previous, not the Trump administration, but the previous administration, I think a lot of us felt that optimism.
Yeah.
And then we got slapped in the face and then beaten the hell out of, for 4 years.
Yeah, and that we didn't get out of it by wishing our way out and being like it'll just get better one day magically. Like it took effort and strife and a lot of anger and a lot of turmoil just to get to that point where you can now start from zero.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stacey Abrams. Thank you, Georgia.
Right.
I think that this book will make, great gifts for people who are toxic optimists. I can't be around those people.
No. Yeah.
I can't be around them. They just really irritate me.
They're like vampires. It's weird. Like
They suck the life
relentless
right out of
optimism
you.
suck something out of you. Yeah.
You just want to turn around and you go, look, I'm not a violent person. I swear. I'm not a
However,
violent person.
Yeah, I make exceptions.
Or if they ring your doorbell, not unexpected, you look out the window, you go, turn the fucking lights off.
Yeah, hide.
But we all know people like that,
Yeah.
and they mean well, they mean just as well as the doom scroller, you know what I mean? Which that was my favorite term recently. I never knew it was a term.
Oh, that's real. Yeah.
But I would find myself doing that on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'd go doom scroll. I'm like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole and it's a dark rabbit hole.
It was either doom, and then somebody said to me, well, what's your other option? The Kardashians?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I think I'll stick with doom scrolling for a little while.
Well, that's the thing. This was meant to be like an antidote or an interruption to doom scrolling. That was the kind of goal, was to be like, I know you're going to be flipping through your phone and just doing this and be like, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad. I'm just hoping you come upon, at that time, not now it's in a book, but at the time I wanted you to just come upon one of those tweets and be like, well, okay, kind of interrupted it. Like you can get back to it, but for this one moment, you have this weird little oasis and it's a strange place and you're welcome to just hang out here for a second and not worry about all that other stuff that's a little more pressing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you. It's just, some of the things that people experience in their life, when they open this book. And that's how I would recommend people read this book. Don't read it page by page. Don't read it in one sitting.
Just flip through.
Set it on the end table, set it on the coffee table, set it next to your coffee pot. And when you wake up in the morning or when you sit down at night and you say, oh man, when you really feel shitty about starting a day or you really feel shitty at the end of the day, you open it. And instead of breathing in and hearing chimes and listening to the sound of the waves, you can get a dose of reality.
Yeah, you can get a blood ghost or.
So this book wasn't as hard for you to put together because you had the collection, but you did have to go through the process of saying, okay, which one am I going to take?
The publisher chose the initial batch and what they thought would be best to see and best to be illustrated. And the artist had some input there too as to what Natalie thought would just things that came to her mind that she could draw. And then after that, it was mostly tweaking them language wise, so they didn't feel quite as much like tweets. There's a few there that keep the day of the week, but initially when I was tweeting them, they always had the day of the week and the Monday and then a tweet, Tuesday and then a tweet. Most of those are taken out just because it doesn't necessarily have to apply to to that specific day. And some of them, the goal was to sort of even just some simple things like line breaks to make them a little more like poems, like weird little poems, as opposed, or some of them just deserve to be sort of a block of text that, yelled at you in all caps at some point. So it was just tweaking all that format, but otherwise, yeah, it was a really good book because the pandemic hit, my creativity went into the toilet, in terms of writing new material.
Right.
And so, but I did have 3 books to edit during that year. And this was one of them, and editing clicked a different muscle for me and always has. And during the pandemic, it worked. And so this was a very good book to have to sort of in the midst of this very strange, peculiar, and very dark time, a good thing to sort of concentrate on.
Okay, yeah, because you have a book coming out in June, is it?
July, and then another in August or October.
And do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. In July, I have the Book of Accidents, which is an adult horror novel about coal mines and haunted houses and cycles of abuse in families in small towns. And then in October, I have Dust and Grim, which is a middle grade, which is about a girl who inherits a funeral home and cemetery for monsters.
So yeah, so you're really a light writer. Yeah, I mean, you're really keeping it light, Chuck.
Keeping it light. The middle grade's pretty light. I mean, it's obviously got monsters and death, but it's like a fun version of monsters and death. In fact, all of the books this year have kind of that monster component to them. They all have a thread of interesting monsters.
Okay. How many hours a day do you write, as opposed to how many hours a day do you think about writing?
It really depends. The book that I'm writing now, which is the sequel to Wanderers, is very different for me. They're different books. I don't write them like I wrote all my other books. In fact, my process has changed somewhat considerably ever since working on Wanderers. So I don't really set a number of hours, but as soon as I get out here, I start to work. And if it's 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hour, 5 hour, whatever I feel is necessary. Some days will be 1,000-word days. Some days will be 4,000-word days. Some days are just thinking days and research days. I'll hit a wall and I'm like, oh, I actually literally don't know anything about this thing I'm about to write. I should probably figure that out. And that'll, that's my stopgap for that day. So it's kind of erratic, but I try, if in a perfect world, 2,000-word day is a wonderful day for me, and I'll take that.
Sometimes if I'm like not at work, like let's say, I have a difficult time relaxing. Like if I am called off sick or I take a vacation day or something, it's like I feel guilty.
Oh yeah.
Does that happen to you, even though you're generally an incorporated? Are writers incorporated?
I have an LLC. Yeah, I'm technically my own employer, I guess. Yeah. I'm my own boss. I'm the worst boss in the world. Yeah, I do sometimes feel, because like every day off is the day I'm not producing, so I don't really get vacation days. But I have learned to kind of cool down a little bit. Like when I first started out, I was writing like 4 or 5 books every year. Wow. And I've been able to slow down thanks to the grace of a good publisher. And
I thought you were going to say thanks to the grace of Adderall or something.
Thanks to the grace of Adderall. Yeah, no, Adderall would just do the opposite for me. I would just
exactly.
Go. Let's back to the 4 or 5 books a year. I can do this. Okay. So I can chill out a little more now and not feel like, but I can plan it a little more. Like I know I'm going to hit a gap, and then I always want to take a break between books, so those are fortuitous.
Yeah, well, I just really appreciate this book. I think it comes along at just the right time. I hope that more people put work out there that's written for everybody. I think that everybody, unless because there are some people who don't like the word fucking shit and stuff.
Yeah, they're not going to like this book.
They're not going to like this book.
No.
In fact, I have to like make sure like the supervisor doesn't know that. Hi, Maddie, you're going to jump in for questions.
Well, you can finish what you're saying. I don't mean to interrupt.
Okay. But I do, Chuck. I really appreciate this book. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity. I miss being a bookseller.
Yeah, I believe
so
it.
much. I don't miss the poverty.
I believe that too.
Small bookshop in a small town in New Jersey. We don't miss the poverty, but I miss people who love books.
Yeah, just books.
Desperately.
Books and people.
Yeah. So, and again, thank you, to Kirsten, Jim, and Maddie for giving me this opportunity. So open it up for questions.
Let's do it.
I mean, first, I just want to say that I've got the Book of Accidents here, the one coming out in July.
Is that the advanced
show off
copy?
The cover to everybody. I'm doing my bookseller job.
Wow, I love that cover.
It's a good cover.
I know, and one of the characters is named Maddie, which means I have to read it.
That's so you do have to read it, yeah. Yeah.
Just wanted to share that. We've got 3 questions, one of which I really like, so I'm interested to see your answer here, Chuck.
Ooh, all right.
So I'll start. This one's actually from Anonymous, so I can't give a name on it.
All right, Anonymous.
Does Chuck ever get stuck while writing a book? If so, what kind of practices does he do to get unstuck?
A good question, and like one of those questions that has Like the answer that should really be about 60 minutes long, because it's, I mean, it's a really hard question. It's a deceptively hard question.
Take your time, elaborate.
Yeah, I know, right? One of the tricks when you have to deal with and talk about writer's block is you have to first figure out if what you're dealing with is writer's block or if it's depression and anxiety, because they're two very different things that can lead to a similar problem when you're working, and you really can't solve them the same way. If you try to write your way through anxiety and depression, it's like, you know, swimming in quicksand. You're just going to sink faster. So, you know, figuring that out first is always key. And then with writer's block, you know, there's a lot of things I do. Number one, I try to recognize that it's not special. I think writers, we mythologize and sort of folklorize a lot of things about our careers and our processes, sometimes to our detriment because we sort of give them too much power. It's really helpful to realize that everybody gets blocked. Like every plumbers, mathematicians. I'm a parent, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know how to deal with my own child today. I don't know. This is going to take some time. Like I need to, or and maybe it just means like you need to go in your room and I need to go in my room, and we just need a second to just not do this. And that's also like how sometimes it is with writing. Sometimes you need to tell the book, I'm going to go in my room and you're going to sit here on the computer and you're just going to shut up for a while and I'm going to go do something else. You know, I don't get stuck in big ways anymore. It used to be that I wrote outlines because when I first started, I would get stuck all the time. I would kind of unspool at about 75% through a book, through a novel. I would be like, you know, if you've ever gone into a room and you don't know why you went into that room, that's how I would be with the book. I'd be like, I'm in here now and I don't know what I do. I'm just gonna leave, turn it off and go home. And, you know, once I started to learn to outline, that really helped my process. And I have since, once again, lost that as part of my process because I don't use that anymore. Ironically, the biggest, most complicated book I ever wrote, Wanderers, I didn't outline. I sort of have learned to intuit those character patterns in the plot and also take it slow and not feel like I need to go. I can pause on an issue. So doing, you know, any of these writing exercises, whether you're going to stop and take a walk or stop and read another book or retroactively do an outline or try to figure out if you have a first act problem in your third act. There's really no one way forward, but there's just a lot of ruminating and thinking and tinkering and picking it apart and trying to just get forward however you can. And sometimes it means you do write your way through it. You're just like, well, I'm stuck, but I'm going to blow something up and I'll figure it out later, because the second draft is always a place to fix all of the woeful, wanton errors of that first draft.
Thank you. And I've got to apologize to everybody here for the trains that are going to keep coming through every 10 minutes now, as it does in Emmaus, being right on the track. So apologies. There's another one. Give me about 10.
It's Emmaus. It could be 10 minutes. Sometimes those trains are.
I'm just waiting for the horn to get by, and then I can talk again. So the next question is from Hillary. Which is your favorite book? And I'm going to ask you to go two different ways on that, of which is your favorite book that you've written, and then what's your favorite book of just all time in general.
I'm going to actually go ahead, if you don't mind. I might reinterpret her question. I think she means what is the favorite one in the book, because she says in the book. I wonder if she means like affirmation.
True. Which is your favorite in the book? I read that.
But I can answer all of that.
She just said yes. You're right. I read it wrong.
Okay. Gosh, you know, I don't know for sure. Trying to think what I think. Well, first of all, there's two. I'll bring two up. One is just because the art is it's a butt with an eyeball.
Nice.
And I just feel like that's. It says, a great day to remember: the perfect is the enemy of the good. Fuck perfection. Perfection is unattainable. A neighbor to Zeno's paradox. Embrace imperfections, your asymmetry, your quirks, that way you eat noodles, that third eye on your butt that can see demons. Wait, what? But I think my favorite in the book is, the challenges you face are yours alone, but you're not alone in facing them. I'm here to cheer you on and to boost you. So is this possum. I don't know where she came from, but she has a spacesuit and stars in her eyes. Cosmic Possum believes in you and is ready to help. And Cosmic Possum is like the greatest drawing that has ever been drawn.
That is a great.
That's
I want
awesome.
that as a t-shirt and a poster and a suit, whatever I can get.
Do
that.
it. We'll sell them here. That would be
Yeah,
awesome.
you'll sell-
I'd love
yeah,
to
it'd
put
be the-
Cosmic Possum on the wall.
Cosmic
I would
Possum,
love
yes.
the original art for any of these illustrations.
Yeah, I'm hoping that maybe Natalie does some stuff she would sell, because she should really sell this art. As for like the other questions that you were asking about, my favorite, you said favorite books that I've written.
Yeah,
right?
favorite book that you've written, and then your favorite book of all time.
All time. That one's even really tough.
You should have had that question coming. Come
know,
on.
right? No. Favorite book I've written, probably Wanderers at this point, just because it was a different book for me, and I learned a lot by writing it, and I learned a lot about myself while writing it, which is super cliched, but also really, really true. Favorite book of all time is hard. I can tell you the book I reread the most, which is Robert McCammon's Swan Song, a similarly gigantic post-apocalyptic, in this case, nuclear winter horror novel. It's similar to The Stand, but I actually prefer it to The Stand, and that's no knock against The Stand, which is a wonderful, wonderful book. But it just captures horror and humanity in such good equal measure. And I've read that book a number of times. It's like 980 pages, so it's a big one to reread.
It's a big book.
It's a big old book. Yeah.
Take some time. Those are the best kind of books, though. You don't finish them in one night.
Yes.
Okay, I've got another question from Deb that says, how about your apples book from a friend from NSO?
North Star Orchard. Wow. What about my apples book? I do have an apples book coming out, an apple horror novel that I'm writing next. That's my next book. It's called The Orchard. And it's about an evil apple. So it's gonna be weird.
White in there, or is that completely separate?
Is there, what's that?
Is there some Snow White connections?
No Snow White. No, it's like it's based on actually.
Good. I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, NSO does their great heirloom apple varieties that we would get there at the Emmaus Farmers Market, and from there I learned a lot about apples, because I don't know. Apples is one of those things where when you don't know much about apples, you're like, well, the apples at the grocery store are the apples. I don't know. They're the fucking apples. I don't know, like Red Delicious and
there's a lot.
Fuji, and they're like, that's it. That's the apples. And then that's not all. Yeah, there's like 3,000 varieties of heirloom apples, and they're some of the ones they sell are phenomenally different. Yeah, and they're just there. Some of them taste like licorice, and some of them taste really tart, and some of them taste really sweet. And there's these massively complex flavors of weird lemongrass and ginger and honey and just things you don't taste in a grocery store apple. And then you'd look deeper into like sort of apple history and all this, like Johnny Appleseed. My God, if you ever want to just read a fantastic history, the true stories of who Johnny Appleseed was, he was a Swedenborgian, which is fairly local to us as a religion. And he was like, he had like wild animal pets, and he would just show up in towns. He was a weird dude. And then you learn about how the Native Americans approached fruit trees and how it was essentially like supposed to be free public food, because they, whether they were itinerant and wandering or not, the trees stayed where the tree was. So it was always just like, well, the food is there for you. You can have that. And then when we showed up and killed and maimed and took everything over, we of course are capitalist nightmare people who are like, well, what do you mean free food? No, we own this. And then sometimes we would butcher Native American orchards by girdling the trees, just like peeling a single ring around the tree, and it stops all the water from getting to the top of the tree. And a year later, it kills the tree. So it's a slow, permanent way of killing orchards. In fact, a lot of the heirloom varieties we have, in this country, in some cases, come from, Canada, France, but also from Native Americans. So there's this weird, fantastic history of apples, and then a current era of heirloom apples. And I was like, there's like a fascinating, like I'm fascinated from it from like I eat them way, but also from the like dark history stuff. So that's, I'm
You've
going to get
got
into
me
the dark history
interested.
stuff.
I feel like my entire life's been a lie with the
Good.
7
take it.
grocery store flavors.
Right? Right?
What?
Yeah, it'll blow you away. Go to the Emmaus Farmers Market when they're there this
I
summer.
will. Yeah, I'm so
Partake of
interested
their
now. That's
weirdest apple.
awesome.
And where
Yeah.
else could you have gone to learn how to flip somebody off and the history of Apple?
That's right.
Honestly.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
I got nothing else going on, but that's what I got. Got that.
Because in the chat, Rose asks, "What are you currently reading?"
Oh, what am I currently reading? That's a good question. I am reading a book called Four Cities from Annalee Newitz, which is about 4 sort of urban centers in history that have been essentially lost. I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but Catalhayuk, Cahokia, the Cahokia Mounds, Angkor, and Pompeii. And it's about sort of unearthing them and how they rose and how they fell and why they fell. And it's been really inadvertently helpful to me because I'm writing, Wander is a peri-apocalyptic book. It takes you through an unfolding apocalypse, but the sequel, Wayward, is post. I mean, there's no way around the fact that it's set after all of that has occurred. So to sort of read a book that's about the deaths of these cities and deaths of, in some cases, whole civilizations, has been really relevant to me. And it's a wonderful book. She's written nonfiction before, but in fact, one of them is referenced in Wanderers, but she's also a science fiction writer of great repute. And it shows because her style is not dry or academic, and it's affable and funny and poignant at the same time. So really a great book, Four Cities.
Maddie, what are you reading?
What am I reading? Well, if I answer that truthfully, my mom will get really angry at me when she rewatches this recording.
Private message.
Because I have a favorite author, and I've reread her series maybe 5 times now. And my mom is really sick of me rereading the same series. It's Sarah Maas. It's some hardcore fantasy.
Yeah.
If there's blood and there's guts, I hate to be so blunt, but that's basically what it is.
Awesome.
And it
that's great. They're great. Yeah.
I've got my one line is whatever it does, it has to take place before modern technology of guns and warfare.
There you go. That's key.
That's my one line. If it takes place before that, I will read it.
Sweet.
And has dragons. There's dragons.
Dragons are good.
I've got that little note.
I am reading The Psychology of Notorious Serial Killers.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
The subtitle is the intersection of personality theory and the darkest minds of our times. It's absolutely fascinating. Oh. Absolutely fascinating. They take there's a personality theory called the Factor 5 model, and uses the acronym. The 5 factors are the acronym is OCEAN, and I'm drawing a total blank right now of what the O stands for, but it's conscientiousness. I'm drawing a blank of what the 5 factor theory is, and I know it. But it really is a fascinating book.
You're on the spot.
Yeah.
What's that?
You're on the spot.
Also, it's the pandemic. I find myself not being able to remember basic words.
Zoom is just all thoughts are out the ear.
Yeah, but it's fascinating. It's just, and I was like picking it up, going, you know what? It's nice because I think personality is an interesting thing.
It is.
Well,
this has been a lot of fun.
I'm really enjoying this conversation, but we are at 8 o'clock now, and we have promised everybody a hard out at 1 hour. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
And for dealing with the lack of my mother, who was supposed to be here. She apologizes. She sent a text. She's on her way home. Vaccine's all good.
Oh my God, but you're a pro. Thank you for doing this. This is great.
Everybody out there, get
thank you to Chuck for being here, and thank you for Rob for doing this for us tonight.
Thanks, guys. Chuck, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much for the thoughtful questions. Everybody get vaccinated, stay safe, wear your masks.
We're going to do the really cheesy everybody wave as we click the leave button. So good night, everybody. Have a good one. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.